Welcome guys. Well, the time has arrived at last. About 2 years ago now, I produced a very popular build guide series about my favorite builds, how I tackle open world, general, regular PvE. So I'm not talking about PvP, I'm not talking about world vs world, raiding, anything like that. I'm talking about the standard game experience that most of you will be playing. I showed off those builds and they were very good for the time, but with balance and just general opinion changes and things having moved on for the past 2 years, I've now got a bunch of new and different exciting stuff to show you guys. Improvements across the board. And so when I say today we're going to be looking at my favorite Elementalist builds, I really do mean like my favorite build throughout most of the history of the game for general standard PvE. There's been some incredible buffs that we can take advantage of, and so I want to talk you guys through this. We're going to start off with Elementalist, other classes coming in the upcoming weeks, and what I want you guys to think about as well as we go through this is actually my intention to take this exact build here through End of Dragons on my initial playthrough. When the expansion comes out, remember, you're not going to immediately have Catalyst. You'll be running around the world, actually exploring and unlocking, and for that purpose, I'll be playing on this. I also suspect that even once I've fully got some of the new specs, I'll still be reverting to some of these. They're just that fun and powerful. So to be clear here, my builds are not about insane damage stacking, the way you just min-max everything you can for pressure. Those builds and playstyles are totally viable, and there's something to be said for killing things so fast that you can avoid a lot of headaches they'd otherwise be offering you. Obviously, when you're raiding, builds like that are very good. But it's of my opinion that the build crafter with Guild Wars 2, when you take a class like we're looking at today, the Elementalist, who has very low health and very light armor, if you just focus on pure uncompromising damage, you leave yourself really vulnerable to a lot of stuff you shouldn't be worrying about. You'll be dying constantly and frustrated about basic experiences that when you look on the internet, no one's even really talking or remarking about, scratching your head wondering whether you're just a bad player. Usually it's not that you're just a bad player, it's that your build isn't strong enough. So my builds tend to be sweet spots between having really high quality of life, really decent resustain and survivability, while paired with immense pressure. More than enough damage you'll ever need to breeze through everything in the game. Nothing will threaten you, and you'll glide through kind of feeling like you're on easy mode. And I really do mean that about easy mode. On today's Tempest build, you're pretty much going to feel like a god. That also means these builds tend to be very well suited for new players. So if you're just getting to grips with the game, you're pretty much at the right place here. So if that sounds good to you, let's take a look at my Tempest and how I have min-maxed the sweet spot between sustain and damage. So what build video is complete without a demonstration at the start? Now, on the series I did before, I kind of had these touchstone ideas of things to cover. If you guys have suggestions of bosses and creatures and things you really want to see me fight, that isn't just going to be like 20 minutes boring grinding against a champion, let me know. So here's just a couple of selections. Heart of Thorns, a Heart of Thorns Hero Challenge. These guys are a little bit easier to fight now that they don't have any retaliation, but this is me soloing one of the events that usually groups are meant to be doing. What you really want to pay attention to here is the condies on the target, just how high the bleed gets, just how high the burn gets, how consistently, and my boons as well. Look at how much quickness I have and how long that quickness sticks about on me on an Elementalist. Look at how little my health is moving. I'm not even dodging and my health basically doesn't move. How quickly his break bar goes down. You can really see just how sturdy this build is with me surrounded, standing in AoE fields and stuff. Really nice demonstration, this one, I think, as we just sort of murder our way through all of this chalk. This next challenge is going to be the Flame Djinn challenge. Maybe you guys are familiar with these things. Flame Djinn are super damage resistant, do massive damage until you break their break bar. Then they become a little bit vulnerable. They're really hard, even for most builds, just a 1v1, let alone 4v1. This was something that I demonstrated all the old builds. I decided to come here on Ellie. Now, these guys are actually going to get me really low. And what I'm actually doing is I'm beating the Flame Djinn here without ever dodging. So if we dodge just a little bit, we'll save massive damage here. But I'm going to eat every one of the abilities and, you know, not too recklessly stand the AoEs, but you'll see how chunky our health stays up and how quickly we can resustain too, because the ability for this build to get its health back is kind of a big thing on this build as well, which I kind of want to demonstrate. So here's a Flame Djinn challenge, 0 dodges, which I think of the previous builds I never even showed once, and just how quickly they all melt down here too. And lastly here for fun, before we get into the build details, I have another demonstration. I don't think I did this one before. And this one's kind of weird, but it's bristlebacks in Heart of Thorns. You know, Heart of Thorns characters get a lot of crap for being really dangerous. I've already shown you in the background me fighting pocket raptors and stuff. I think bristlebacks tend to be quite underrated. They have like this Gatling gun attack that just keeps going and going and going. And I usually find, if I've not like properly thought of my build, I can end up getting caught out by these guys, and it's really frustrating. They're so tanky, you can't, like, counter pressure through. And I figured, well, hey, let's come to this area of Heart of Thorns where there's a million bristlebacks and try to aggro as many as possible. One of the things you're going to see this build is good at is projectile reflect and mitigation stuff. So I figured, let's go crazy with this and see how well we can survive. And this is very deadly, what you're looking at here. I managed to aggro 3 veterans plus all the little ones, and you'll see just how low these guys end up managing to get me too. But we will actually ultimately manage to grind our way through the fight here. One thing that you can see here is I have the Signet heal. I can actually press that. I'll give you those details in a second. We won't lose our passive, so we get a lot lower than we really should have. But I really like this demonstration. This is a very, very dangerous place, and in fact, once I've killed these here, I'm going to show you what it looks like to run over on any old normal build, like say an Ellie builds that's more glassy, like staff, just straight up damage. Just as a point of comparison. So actually, I only really have a Marauder set up as well. So here, this is the original run, then dying. So this is me on a Marauder Ellie, with just kind of damage traits. Unfortunately, a Guardian came to fight with this other bristleback, so it kind of ruined it. So look, here, I'll run over to this guy. This is just one of the veterans. And I think as I aggro him, I'm going to be a little bit low on health at the start here. But again, that's probably just the amount that Marauder would have given me. And watch, as he look at how much damage these abilities do, okay? That's a normal build, so to speak. As compared with what you just watched. I mean, he even nearly defeats me in the one ability. Or we can fight multiple of them and shrug them off. So, yeah, let's run on in and see what we got with the build. Again, if you guys have cool ideas for bosses and stuff to demo on the other classes, let me know. Okay, so let's open up by talking a little bit about gear, what exactly we're running for stat sets, what we're running for runes and sigils. So I'll pop open my equipment panel here. Now, the main stat type that I'm going to be recommending is actually based on a buff that occurred over this year. It was really huge, and that is the Celestial stat type. If you can get Celestial, I think it's an absolutely fantastic combo, not just for Elementalists, but a lot of professions as of the most recent buff. So, quick explanation about Celestial is that it's a stat line that gives you all the most of the attributes in the game, but in kind of small increments of them. So rather than having a ton of power, you have just a bit of power, but in addition, you're going to get a ton of other stats. As you can see here, we have power, precision, toughness, vitality, ferocity, healing power, condition damage, concentration, and expertise all at once. And what that means for these kind of generalist, open world, regular gameplay builds, you're actually getting a massive amount of value. While each individual stat is lower than if you were going for something more specialized, the total stat pool you get is massive. Basically, you're going to have an ungodly amount of raw attribute power split across basically every element of your character. Now, in the past, I haven't actually really recommended Celestial. I found that it was too middle of the road. It was too compromising in one direction or another. But the buff that occurred this most recent year is if you look at this huge chunk of stats, those bottom two, concentration and expertise, never used to exist. That's right, they just straight up dumped another 2 stat lines onto this, representing hundreds more attribute points. So concentration is boon duration, expertise is condition duration. Both of those are really useful on Ellie. And why? Well, let's look at concentration first of all. Remember what I said, how Ellie has quite a low health pool? Well, the fact we're getting vitality from Celestial stats immediately helps with that situation. But the idea behind Elementalist design is it has kind of a low health pool, but it gains access to lots of boons like protection, which means we take less damage in the first place. That means, therefore, you kind of want those boons around a lot. Ellie is just one of those classes that tend, or back during Classic Vanilla Balance especially, was defined by having a lot of broad boon access. Concentration being added in the buff this year means all those boons are on you for a lot longer and a much more regular period of time now, which is excellent. Oh, it looks like we're being hit by an imp here. And the same is generally true of expertise too. Elementalist, as it rotates through its various achievements, gets a lot of condies, like the Earth line will have a lot of cripples, and it will have a lot of immobilize, and it will have a lot of bleed effect. Fire will have burning damage. Water will have chill. All of these now last longer, and you might think of a boon condition like chill as being kind of irrelevant for PvE. That's not true. When it comes to break bars and actually landing CCs and being able to kite and move around, having all of those things just be a lot stickier is really, really valuable. If you want to learn a bit more about break bars, bars. I did a new player guide on that a couple of months ago. You guys might want to check out. And you can see how strong stuff like chill and immobile are just there. So this buff basically has been huge. It means pretty much every area of the build is going to get some kind of value out of Celestial. Because you got to think about it, when I'm in water attunement, really, I want healing power so that these skills feel potent. You know, the healing and regenerative ones. Well, we get that. When we're in Earth, we probably want a little bit of condition damage because a lot of the Earth abilities are like hybrid damage abilities. So you're going to want that there. You're going to want the expertise there as well. And likewise, for the other elements, when we're in air, we want crit chance and we want crit damage. Celestial gives us everything. So this is a pure Celestial build. Seriously, these are all Celestial trinkets. This is all Celestial armor. You obviously don't have to go to Ascended. You can wear Exotic if you like. And then we come to the weapons. I'm taking a dagger and I'm taking a warhorn. They are both also Celestial. We'll look at what those skills mean. When it comes to the sigils on the weapons, I have a sigil of Celerity here, and I have a sigil of Rage. So you want to go Rage and Celerity. Now, what do both of these sigils do? Celerity is gain quickness after you land a CC. And Rage is gain quickness whenever you critically hit someone. So the one boon that Elementalist just in general doesn't get a good amount of is quickness. When the Catalyst comes out with the next expansion, there'll be more quickness specifically there. But what if you want to play a Tempest? What if you want to play a Corelli or whatever else? And I'm on a Tempest build here. You don't really get quickness. Quickness is really nice on any class that has a lot of buttons to press. Elementalist has a ton of buttons to press. We have 20 weapon skills to get through. So quickness is really, really good. The thing is, in the past, it was like, how could you really sustain much quickness? It's not that valuable, is it? But remember, Celestial was buffed, so we get concentration. So the quickness that comes from our sigils now is extended and is longer, and you'll see specifically because we have a warhorn, it's going to get even longer than that. So through these two sigils together, you can actually have incredibly high quickness uptime. That will help you play, not just through rotating through your regular skills, but look at the way that Tempest works. Say we want to use an overload on this imp that attacked us a second ago. It takes a long time to cast this skill. If we want to then use a fire overload or an earth overload, they take a long time. But if I give myself quickness through CCing a target before I actually trigger the ability, all of a sudden I can execute these overloads really fast. And I'm telling you guys, it's amazing feeling. It is the coolest thing to combine with Tempest. I absolutely adore it. And at no other period in the game's lifespan have I really enjoyed this combo this much. Really cool. The last thing to talk about for gear is going to be then our rune. So you do have some choice here. I've gone with Pack. Now, why do I have gone with Pack? Pack is more boon duration, first of all. Like, if we mouse over our boon duration here, you'll see I'm at 73%. You guys realize the cap is 100, right? So we're actually really in a very high level here. It means that all this quickness coming in is nearly on its way to being doubled, right? So we're getting boon duration from Pack, but we're also getting power. Power is really excellent for just running around and supplementing the fact that we've lost a little bit from being on Celestial. And then we get another bump of precision on that tier 6. It can be kind of hard to see, but if you look very carefully, this tier 6 gives you a big perk and it gives you an attribute bump. It gives you 125 precision. So again, just like Celestial stuff itself, Pack runes are kind of a really well-rounded pool of things that we like to have in PvE. And then finally, this is the really beautiful thing, this is what I really like about Pack runes, is the actual special effect of the tier 6. Grant nearby allies 5 stacks of might, fury, and swiftness for 8 seconds while in combat. And that will refresh every 30 seconds. So all of those boons, again, will be longer because of all of our crazy boon duration. Now, you might say, well, WP, does the swiftness really matter much? No, it doesn't. Does the fact that this is AoE matter much? No, not really. Does even the might matter much? Because honestly, you guys are going to see through this build, we give ourselves a ton of might. No, not really. What I like most about these Pack runes is the fury. See how we just got attacked by this imp again, and this fury is coming on us? See, the one thing that this build is going to lack a little bit of is fury. Now, you do have some. There's fury here on this skill 2. In air, it's called Convergence, but you'll see it only gives us 4¼ seconds of fury. So if you don't run Pack runes, then you're gonna kind of be locked into constantly coming back to this skill, like really regularly, and thinking about it a lot, and it just doesn't feel good. I mean, you can kind of play around it with that way. What I like to do instead is get the Pack runes on, which gives me this really nice baseline chunk of fury. that we can extend, and we can supplement with convergence. You can still use it, and you can sort of keep juggling the Fury to keep it on you as long as possible. But in this way, you just get a lot of quality of life. Get your main baseline Fury from here. And if you guys don't know much about the game, Fury is a really strong boon. 20% crit chance just from having that is massive. You want it on you as much as possible. And I like the freedom of just being able to run over to, say, this Imp, and just use an ability. And look at this. I immediately have quickness, I have Fury, I have might, I have loads of stuff. And I can just run around and kind of do my thing. So that's the idea of pack. I really, really like pack. It's a shame to not experiment with other runes, certainly, so you guys can have fun with it. But yeah, that's how I like to run my gear. Let's now run in through some other stuff, and I'm going to film the next section of this video somewhere else where I'm not constantly getting attacked by imps. I thought this would be a nice place to film since, you know, lava and we're in Ellie. Let's go somewhere, I don't know, watery, I guess. Now, just a tiny disclaimer for you all, I feel the need to say. Throughout this build video, I want you all to understand that a huge amount of what I've decided on are negotiable choices. You are totally free and welcome, if you don't like the idea of one utility skill or you want to run another, to make minor swaps based on your preferences here and there. You can do that especially with the traits too. Don't be scared. I mean, if you change way too much, you're basically going to be looking at a different build. But Guild Wars is a game about buildcraft. I think just the nature of net decking something off the internet and never thinking coherently about it for yourself is kind of missing a big part of the game. Usually when I've done build videos in the past, I've taken the time at every little juncture to explain every little bit of nuance. I'm not doing that this time. This time, I'll be explaining the reverse. When there is something that it's really important you don't mess with, I'll tell you. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to make those little tweaks if you want to. I think that's a big part of the game. All that in mind, what I am showing on my build videos, I personally think is pretty goddamn concrete. There we go, some nice water and something soothing here. So let's get into the ability section. I'm going to run you guys through which abilities I've picked. The reasons for those abilities will become much more obvious when we get into the trait section in a second. But I'll give you guys a little demonstration of each ability on this build and, you know, whether I think it's really, really valuable or not. So first of all, you have the Fire Overload. This thing is incredibly powerful, massive amounts of might for you, huge amounts of protection at the start, a big explosion we'll look at later. Use this very, very, very regularly. The fire auto attack, I don't tend to use too much, just a bit of filler if I have nothing else going on. It's not that great. Drake's Breath too, sorry, the Dagger 2. This is excellent on Celestial. As you look at the burning there, it's a ton of burning, over 5 targets, and a good amount of both power and condi damage. You might look at that tooltip and think that the condis do more, but don't forget that the power stuff can crit, which means that it's just a really, really good skill. I use this very regularly. Burning Speed is one of my favorite skills in the game, just for running around. Lots of movement, nice wide explosion. I use that very regularly. Next, we have Heat Sink. This will duplicate the Might and Fury you have on you and actually copy it to allies that are nearby. And you will have an ally nearby on this build. We do have a summon, so I do use this regularly. It's especially fun to use after Overload. Because the Overload will give you a lot of might. And then finally we have Wildfire. This is a nice field, generally for damage, but one of the traits we can pick as well actually makes this a very defensive field as well. Moving over to the Water Attunement, I don't really auto-attack too much either, though the range is okay on this. Now, Cone of Cold is a skill that usually on Ellie I ignore, and I don't use very often. But on Celestial gear, this actually is really decent re-sustain for you. This will heal you a good amount. So, do consider it, just like the Water Overload, which again is one of your biggest ways of getting your health back. I don't usually think about that for healing allies and stuff, but it's very good. Honestly, one of the real true pleasures of Celestial is ordinarily on my Ellie builds, I kind of avoid Water Attunement a lot, and I don't really feel like some of the skills are very impactful. Suddenly, these healing-based ones feel impactful because of all the healing power on Sally stuff. It was kind of a big aha moment for me. Frozen Burst, I also use very regularly, but not for damage and not for applying chill, but because it's a blast finisher. Back during the day, that never used to be a blast, but it is now, so you can combo it with other things. We'll come back to that in a second, I guess. Tidal Surge, this is really good, again, for healing you, but also break bar damage. I use that regularly, but only when there's a break bar. If there's not, I tend to kind of ignore it. And then finally, the Water Globe is great because, again, it can heal you up. You can use the 3 in it, and you get a nice big combo field heal there. So I do use that one very regularly, too. Next, for air. I tend to air auto attack a lot. I like lightning whipping. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but it's like a double little hit. Probably some of the other ones are useful. Convergence already explained. It's great for Fury, so do use that regularly. You have to hit a target with it, by the way. As you see that, I didn't give myself Fury. You do actually have to hit someone. Shocking Aura is great as well. I use this for getting through break bars, but also this is quickness application. You run in, blow up the Shocking Aura, and you can start a fight with a stun, which will proc the sigil we talked about, and that's where you can get your quickness. You can go immediately from that into an air overload, which is a fantastic part of the kit. I use air overloads all the time. Massive damage, lots and lots of power there. I use the 4 for swiftness out of combat all the time. Really useful using Cyclone. It's also good break bars as well. Don't forget that the skill 4 here in air and the skill 4 in water, they're both CCs, so just like Shocking Aura, they're both giving you quickness when that sigil cooldown's off. So do use these. This is, again, another nice thing about this build. All the skills are like giving you a bit of value. Even if you kind of fire them off, hey, you might get a sigil proc, and quickness feels good. And another thing that's amazing for the build, I use this all the time, is Lightning Orb. This might not look like much if you haven't really paid attention to it, but any enemies standing near this orb get pulsed with damage like mad. It's really, really good. I use this constantly. I'll like cast this as I'm running in, and then what I'll do is I'll like Shocking Aura for quickness straight into an overload air or something. That's usually what I like to do. Finally, for Earth Attunement, I don't really auto-attack much, but don't sleep on it. With the bleed on there and his hybrid damage, it's not bad. Ring of Earth is just another of these amazing abilities that feels good because we're on Celestial. It also interrupts projectiles. I very rarely use that in PvE, though. Earthen Rush is incredibly strong. One of the traits we're going to use means this is actually a brilliant damage skill, okay? It's fun because it moves you like the fire ability, but it's a damage skill too, so pay attention to this. It's also a leap. You can use that for combos. Sand Squall, this extends the duration of the boons on you. So, if you are fighting and you notice your sigils of procs giving you quickness, that's when you want to Sand Squall. If you Sand Squall while you have the quickness, it's very easy to do that. You'll extend it even longer. So all the concentration and then everything's getting boosted even further from this. It's fantastic. Don't forget about this ability, and a little bit of protection there as well is nice. One of the reasons you'll feel immortal, you reflect projectiles from it. Dust Storm is also incredibly good. This will stack major bleeds on enemies. Again, that Condi damage actually does something. But also Blind Spam. Blind Spam is one of the best things you can utilize in PvE to stay alive. If you're ever feeling a little bit worried or there's a lot of targets around, Dust Storm is your friend. Finally, the Earth Overload. Usually you guys might think, oh, this is just a tanky thing. This is just a thing to ignore. It doesn't matter much. No, no, no. This is excellent too. Again, because of one of our traits for damage. It will stack bleeds just standing near people, but it ends with an immobilization effect. Remember that. The heal skill of my choice is Signet of Restoration. So, as an Ellie, we have all these abilities. I want to keep using them. I don't want to be standing around casting heals. So this will just keep bumping our health up while we cast our other abilities and do other stuff. And it has some fun interactions out there too. Next, we have Feel the Burn. So this is a quick little shout that I like because, again, I don't want to waste time too much pressing these buttons. I've just listed through a ton. So, for example, if I'm in an Earth Overload, I can feel the burn in the middle of it. I can throw the fire shout out while doing other stuff, right? And so you can just keep popping that, keep popping that. It's damage, it's burns, it's might for you. It's just good. Next, we have Signet of Fire. One of the traits is going to improve this. But what you want to remember to do, and I actually forget to do this quite often, is just keep spamming this. Like on the start, when I'm at 1200 range, a lot of this other stuff isn't that much range. Like even the Lightning Orb takes a long time to get that far away. So when you're like closing the gap, say on this troll, open with a Signet of Fire, right? And what that would do is stack actually a ton of burn on him that lasts a really long time. Look at that burn. It's reading a huge amount of damage. We're not even level 80 here, by the way, so don't trust the numbers too much. Very, very, very strong. And then passively, it's even more precision. All the precision from the pack runes, all the precision from the Signet of Fire, and then when we get Fury on us, it's going to jump up to a good amount as well. That's why we have so many like godlike stats. Finally, Aftershock. Aftershock is great against break bars. It will put because it will put immobilization on targets. It will give us lots of protection. Look, I just pressed this one shout. Look at all these boons that came in from that one shout there. And that's because we tagged this creature over here and put in combat. We got the pack rune as well at the same time. But that immobilization, again, means that this is damage. And again, it's a blast finisher, so lots of fun things you can do there. Finally, the elite of my choice, and I try to keep this guy up all the time, is the Glyph of Elementals. So, this is actually really well balanced. I like this in all the achievements. If you've got a break bar, it's cool to use it in air, because there's like an activatable stun. Summoning the water guy, he can give you a massive heal. It's in fact such a big heal that it's probably too much, to be honest. But probably my favorite version of it. Okay, it's either the Earth one, who is like ridiculously tanky, okay, or it's basically you can play like a ranger. The enemies will always target the Earth guy. Or it's the fire guy. Now, why the fire guy is quite cool is because he has a, you know, a targeted attack here, a really big heavy damage. So if I'm starting a fight and I fire overload and then I heat sink, I can give him a ton of might really easily, and he actually hits things. He actually does damage. There's the other side of it, which is when I get in combat and I proc my pack rune. He's got 25 might fury right now. When he uses his ability, he does a lot of damage. Look at how much damage he did to the bone whip there. So he's pretty fun, and I like that whole other dimension. It's another cool thing you can do while you're on this build. Another cool thing to think about. So there you have it. Those are the skills I picked. That's how I utilize them. Let's run on finally into the traits and see how this all comes together. Okay, so traits will modify our abilities fairly significantly. So let's go have a look. Now, the 3 lines I've picked are Fire, Earth, and Tempest. I guess we'll start with Tempest since that's the elite specialization. Tempest unlocks those overloads that you've seen. It unlocks the shouts, of which I'm using too. So we get generally pretty good value from it. The first one I've picked is Gale Song. I love this trait. What this will do is when we get knocked back or CC'd in some way, it will instantly stun break it. And it will give us super speed so we can run around and keep doing things. So here's the thing. Obviously, stun breaks do exist. I haven't got any of them selected on my utility skill bar, and I don't really want to compromise in that way. My overloads do technically count as stun breaks, but I'll be using them pretty regularly anyway, and they have charge up times. Unreliable. The other thing is, for most of the time, if you're using your own stun break, like actively having to think about it, it might take you so long to react and actually press the thing, your character was about to stand up at that point anyway. This, because it's based on the game itself, like the tick that you get CC'd, you'll be stun broke. And the result is that you almost feel like you weren't stunned at all. Not only this, but you're going to start sprinting around. Don't believe me how great this feels? It actually just happened on the video. When I was doing this with the fire elemental, he CC'd me. He was going to knock me back, but I hardly even felt it because for free, I stun broke it. That's a brilliant representation of what happens constantly in Guild Wars 2. Makes you glide like butter through the game, really. It's really good quality of life. It can happen every 40 seconds. I adore this trait whenever it triggers. Even better if you're in like a world boss or a big like Zerg meta where lots of people get CC'd all at once, like with some big slam. When you do this, you'll stun break 5 people around you as well. You'll do that for everyone else. And it's just the coolest, like most supportive, fun feeling thing. I love this trait. Next, I pick Invigorating Torrents. So, 2 of the other boons we don't have too much of are Regen and Vigor. So that's why when I used the Aftershock earlier, we got both of those boons. So Regen, again, is just like lots of constant sustain. It's a lot like why I've picked Signet of Restoration. I like to just constantly have my health getting bumped up. You will feel this majorly. The Vigor, to be honest, I don't really care that much about for this build and for most of the PvE. This is such a strong build. You're not going to be like actively dodging constantly, and you don't really want to be actively constantly dodging because that's time you could be spent using skills and stuff anyway. I'm obviously not giving you guys the advice never dodge. I'm just saying it'll be rare enough that when you want to dodge, it didn't matter whether you had Vigor or not. But it's a nice extra boon to have on there, so hey, why not? And it might help you every now and then. There is another reasonably good choice here. That's Tempestuous Area, which will give you more might and put Weakness out. Weakness is definitely a great thing. It will reduce the damage you take by a good amount. And finally, Grandmasters. Again, a lot of this is pretty variable, but my favorite is Elemental Bastion. Again, what this means is whenever we apply an aura, we heal. And also, when we get chunked below 75% health, we get a Frost Aura for free, which heals us, and Frost Aura is reduced incoming damage. So, by being a Tempest, we get extra strong protection from Hardy Conduit, we get lots of Frost Aura, and we get all these constant little pulse heals. So when we look back at our Dagger, for example, this actually heals us. Shocking Aura heals us a little bit. When we look at Sand Scroll, that's a Magnetic Aura. That heals us a little bit. Aftershock heals us a little bit. Feel the Burn heals us a little bit. I really, really like this trait. You can go with more pressure if you like, but as a baseline, this is how I like to play Tempest. You'll see just how much resustain and just comfort we get just by running around. You will feel it. You won't be struggling against stuff that I see most new players and sort of super glassy players end up struggling against. Next, I take Earth. Now, you might think Earth is like super tanky. Like, what's the point? Why not take Arcane or something? Well, Earth actually can turn a lot of your abilities into more damage when you're on Celestial. I'll show you how. First of all, I run Serrated Stones. This gives us straight up 5% more damage on all of our flat damage, but also it increases our bleeding duration by 20%. Next, we have Strength of Stone. And this is really, this one is not negotiable. Do not mess with Strength of Stone. This is amazing. Gain condition damage based on our toughness. So, we're Celestial. We get toughness, we get condition damage, we get more out of the toughness that we built. Brilliant. But then, look at this special extra effect. Inflict bleed whenever you immobilize. That's nearly 3,000 damage on every immob. That's why an ability like Earthen Rush that really usually doesn't feel that satisfying to use, now is good. It feels satisfying because that is a mob. That is 3,000 damage. And when I say 3,000, again, we're not in a level 80 area, so it's good damage, guys. Aftershock is a mob, but it's not just on one target. This is actually everyone around you. So here, I'm going to zone somewhere else just to really emphasize how cool this is. Let's go to my classic place, the Dolyak pen. You guys have seen this a million times. This is my like go-to area just to show off some regular enemies, right? So this is how strong this trait is, right? And running Aftershock, remember it's a blast and it's all this protection. It's a generally, and it's an aura and so on. Watch, we've got a bunch of Dolyaks here. I'm just going to press Aftershock. That's it. They're all immobed. And look at the bleeding that they're taking. This is just Aftershock. And they're bleeding. And they're bleeding. And yes, it's on a ton of targets here as well. 10 targets, all the Dolyaks. And we're just melting them down. On an ability that really wouldn't normally be doing anything, we've just chunked them to half. And that's before we get all of our might and stuff. And once we, in a regular fight, you're going to have a ton of might. And that's going to bump this trait up even more. Strength of Stone is awesome. It does the same for Earth Overload as well. Really cool, makes the build shine. And lastly, I do Written in Stone because we do have 2 signets. If I want to press the Signet of Restoration now, I won't lose the passive effect. And when I press the Signet of Fire on the opener, which again is just crazy damage, and again it's a big AoE burst, if I want to do that at the start, I'm still getting the precision, even though it's on cooldown. So this is very nice as well. The other traits generally aren't, you know, you could be super tanky with Stoneheart or super condy tanky with Diamond Skin. PvE never really requires them, so yeah, Written in Stone. Finally, I have Fire. Fire I've gone with, again, because it augments our skills in some fun ways. First thing I really want you guys to pay attention to on Fire is this ability here. It's called Sunspot. It says, gain a fire aura and damage nearby foes when you attune to fire. Now, what you need to know about Tempest here is if you look at Overload Fire, it will trigger Sunspot. So, likewise, by the way, when I go into Earth Overload, I'll get Earthen Blast, okay? That's a subtle interaction a lot of people won't be thinking about. But Sunspot triggers when I enter Overload Fire. So the Fire Tornado should only do a little something at the start, but if you watch, when I actually use it against this wolf here, right? You see, I did a little bit of burn at the start, but it stacked a ton of burn and a big explosion on him instantly. So let's just keep that in mind. Now, Burning Precision. Burning we inflict has increased duration, just like the bleeding one that we had before. And also our crits have a chance to inflict burning. It's just strong. Next, Burning Rage. Sunspot inflicts 2 burning. So what that means is my Overload Fire opens with a big double burn. And our condition damage is increased. And the radius of Sunspot and the Sunspot that comes from the Overload Fire also is increased. So you're like doing double Sunspots by being a Fire Tempest. Very subtle, but it's really good. Lots of fun. And I hope you're noticing here that at so many opportunities, not only do we have Celestial stats, but we have all these extra random attribute conversions and attribute bumps, like all this extra condition damage that's just here, that just pushes us into these ludicrous levels. So we got like this extra like explosion of pressure. And what about another explosion of pressure? Pyromancer's Puissance. So this trait used to just be about might stacking. It's a really weird trait now, and it's gone through some changes in recent years. But basically what this means is whenever we finish a Fire Overload, a specific Tempest interaction, or whenever we leave Fire Attunement, it takes all the might on us and explodes it into a ton of damage. Now you might say, well, WP, doesn't that suck because I want to keep all my might. I want lots and lots of might. But trust me, guys, this build has an absurd amount of might. You can refresh it very quickly. So what will happen, for example, is we'll start fighting, say like this. We'll get a blast out of the Aftershock. We'll get Feel the Burn. Look, we have 16 might, and then it will trade 10 of it down into a fully charged Pyromancer's Puissance. By the time it's over, we still have 16 on us. And then if I was in combat when I rotate out, it would trade 10 down and do another big explosion. And if you watch footage, I mean, if you're watching my other videos and you're seeing me playing this build, if you watch very closely, you will see, right? So for example, here I have 20 might. I'm in combat when I leave. Oh, I broke combat. Damn it. When I leave, you'll see these extra explosions, and they hit hard. They really do. And they do good burn. It's lots of fun. The other traits are kind of okay. The big one that I want to point out is Blinding Ashes. This is blind things when you burn. So if you're struggling even more, take this, because what that means is Feel the Burn is this massive AoE blind. It means that this, if you guys ever played Thief, it means this becomes kind of like a Thief blind field, right? Even though it's doing damage, because every little tick is burn. And all the other places that you get burned. It means that your pulsing burns out on Drake's Breath across different targets. There is an ICD on it, I want to be clear. But across multiple targets will do that. So yeah, that's how I like to run Fire Attunement, and that's where all the big pressure comes from. And that, in a nutshell, is the build, guys. That's how I run it. Those are some of the sleeper traits that I've really fallen in love with recently. And I seriously do recommend you guys give this a shot. It is absolutely what I'll be playing throughout End of Dragons. It's definitely my favorite Ellie build as of now. You should be fine against champions, against veterans, against all manner of most content in the game, especially when it comes to just general exploration, general gameplay. You should have a great time. So thanks, guys. I hope this was useful to people who have been asking desperately for whatever my build is. Now you can copy it and have fun. And if you guys have got any feedback or want to show your support for the video, please feel free to. That would encourage me to make more. See you next time. You guys can let me know in the comments, actually, which next profession you want to see. We'll do it that way. Vote in the comments which is the next one you want, and I'll endeavour to make that the next video. Take care now, guys.